All right, we're going to hit Egypt here in chapter 2, finish up this first unit. Egypt is interesting because, well, obviously, of all the early civilizations, they have the longest lasting monuments with the pyramids. And so, those are definitely eye catching. And just the Egypt is interesting just in the longevity of that civilization. You can see here that the kingdom's really divided up into 5 different parts. You have the Old Kingdom, from 2680 to 2200 BCE. So even that is 400, basically 320 some odd years or whatever. Um, then you have this intermediate period where the stability of the government falls apart. It's reinstituted with the Middle Kingdom. That falls apart after 300 or so odd years. You have a period of instability for a couple hundred years, and then you have the New Kingdom. But if you consider this all part of one thing, you're looking at an empire that lasts roughly 1,500 years. And then if you want to extend that even further on past to Greek rule and to Roman rule, to like through Cleopatra and all that, you're looking at an empire of 2,600 years, which is a considerable amount of time. And just think about the last 2,600 years and human history. You're going back to the time that Egypt was still kicking. So there we go. The story of Egypt really revolves around the Nile River. I'm sure that everybody's familiar with that. The Nile is a river in Africa. It flows from the middle of Africa out to the Mediterranean Sea. So it actually flows on the globe south to north. We kind of chatted about that. Menthos is the Egyptian priest that started to divide came up with the idea of the Old Kingdom, the New Kingdom, and so forth and so on. But if we look at Egypt as a civilization, it's even further divided. You have Upper Egypt, which is over here at Thebes. This is going to be your older kingdom, and then your lower kingdom or lower Egypt is going to be closer to the Mediterranean, and that's going to be over here. I think one of the interesting things when we look at it, obviously, the kingdoms are easy to divide up because you have that intermediate period in between each one, but you also have specific goals that were laid out by those kingdoms or by those forms of government. So the Old Kingdom that's gonna rule from 2680 to 2200, their focus is not on expanding. They're not looking to move south or north and build their influence. What they're looking on is they're trying to establish stability and food production, right? Like trying to grow enough food to feed everybody, to harvest it, to store it, to redistribute that food, and creating some kind of a strong government to do that. In the Egyptian civilization, the pharaoh is seen as godlike, although the kings actually don't start calling themselves pharaohs until I believe the Middle Kingdom. And the king's existence would ensure that the world would continue. And so, even when he passes on, that legacy continues going on. And without a king, chaos is going to fall upon the earth. And that's what you see in those intermediate periods where you don't have the strong, stable governments, and everything falls apart. During this Old Kingdom, which is kind of interesting, is when the pyramids were constructed. And those pyramids are used only as tombs. They weren't a form of a place of worship or business or banks or anything like the ziggurats in the rest of Mesopotamia. And the king is basically entombed. He's given everything that he needs to travel into that afterlife, and then sealed up after he goes away. There we have the Pyramid of Giza and the Sphinx, the Great Pyramid. These 3 small pyramids here in front are actually attempts at the Middle Kingdom or the New Kingdom to reconstruct these pyramids. You can see the stones are put on, and then they typically have some kind of a kind of like a mason a coating on the outside to smooth them over, right? Egypt is interesting. because of the Nile and because the Nile floods on a relatively predictable schedule, um, the major building projects of Egypt during this time obviously could be the pyramids, but they didn't have to focus as much on irrigation like the rest, like Mesopotamia, the Mesopotamian societies, right? And so because of the flood schedule and the ability to grow ample amounts of food, you could devote a manpower into those pyramids. The Egyptian civilization is interesting because again, we're taxing grain production. So the government is taking grain from people that grow it, and it's redistributing them to the people that are working on redistributing food to people that are working on the pyramid. So if you think about it, like you have government workers, and government workers get paid from your taxes. And so that's basically, it's a redistributive government. So we have that. You have the pyramid systems that tie into that would tie into everything else. So you do have the tombs, and then you would have areas outside that have buildings and government and those types of areas, right? One of the reasons for the stability in Egypt is going to be the fact that they are so far away from their neighbors. Obviously, you have Mesopotamia that looks close on the map, but it's separated by a great desert. So to the east, they're separated by a desert. To the west, they're separated by a desert. And then to the north, you have the Mediterranean Sea. In the south, you have the Nubian Empire, which is it's a strong enough government, it's a strong enough empire to resist raiders, but it's not a strong enough empire to really challenge Egypt. And so basically, this is a buffer zone on any type of tribal activity that would come into Egypt from the south, right? And so we have that. Old Kingdom, the focus is going to be on life on Earth, right? It's going to be about producing grain and feeding everybody, right? And so then we run into this idea that as the Old Kingdom starts to fade, leadership starts to wane, you move into this intermediate period where the idea is that suffering on Earth is acceptable because you're going to have joy in the afterlife, right? And so this idea in this intermediate period is that after you die, that your soul is going to be judged by the gods, and your heart is going to be weighed against harmony and order, so that you do the things that you were supposed to do. If your heart tells the gods about all of the sins that your soul committed, then it's going to be tossed to a crocodile-headed demon that's going to eat your soul for eternity. And this is what it looks like. And so if you can kind of think about that period of that first intermediate period of social disorder and the changes that brings about. So the middle kingdom comes about when Mentuhotep reunites Egypt. He reunites the upper and lower areas of Egypt, and he's going to take on this role of Pharaoh in a different way, where he's not just God on earth, but I guess he is God on earth. He's part human, part God. And he's the shepherd of the people. He's going to oversee the people. And one of the ways that he's going to bring about change in Egypt during this Middle Kingdom is he's going to look to expand his power and influence. And so he's going to invade the people to the north or to the south, who are the Nubians. He's going to encourage people to immigrate to Egypt during this time frame, and this is when you're going to see the immigration of the Canaanites from the Middle East into Egypt during this time frame. And he's going to take war prisoners, people that are captured in combat by the Egyptian army. He's going to bring them in and settle them in different places in Egypt as farmers. And so we can see that. So you're going to start to see, this Middle Empire. We're going to start to move down to Nubia down here. We're going to have a little bit more contact with Mesopotamia, but not a ton. Moving out a little bit along the Mediterranean Sea up here. This assimilation and this bringing in of outsiders is actually what's going to undo the Middle Kingdom. the Canaanites are actually going to overthrow the king. And the reason the Canaanites are going to be able to do this, and we're going to talk about this in the next chapter, is their ability to get their hands on a large quantity of brass, or not brass, bronze weapons and tools, right? The Canaanites that were in the Middle East are going to be able to trade for copper, burn it down, and create bronze weapons. And the Egyptian army can't compete with that. And so the Canaanites are going to take over, depose the Pharaoh, and run us into this period known as the Second Intermediate Period. Over time, they're going to lose power, and the new kingdom's going to come about. I don't know. The new kingdom's going to see this active campaign to spread Egyptian culture and ideas into new lands. And so, as the new kingdom comes to power, they're going to look to expand ideas into places like into places like the Middle East, right? They're going to conquer all of Nubia. They're going to set up puppet governments in lands that they conquer. And then they're going to import royalty into Egypt from other places, and they're going to teach these people, using Egyptian methods and Egyptian ideas. And then once those people come of age, they're going to send them back. And so the royal families of different places are going to take on more Egyptian ideas than their homelands, right? At that, see kind of what else is important. Probably the thing that separates the new kingdom from the others is there's not pyramid building, but there are tomb buildings. Typically, you're going to see like the Valley of the Gods is going to be created during this time, and so you're going to have tombs, but not pyramids, right? Amenhotep is going to rule for a very brief period of time. One of the interesting things about him is he's going to try to install monotheism in Egypt, and trying to force the worship of Aten, who was the sun god. His rule is cut relatively short because he's assassinated, and then his young son Tutankhamun takes over. And he is also killed at a very young age. Of course, King Tut, or Tutankhamun, is probably just best known because his is one of the few tombs to be found undiscovered or undisturbed. And so there was a treasure trove of information that was uncovered in the 1920s when that was taken over. We have that. New Kingdom is going to take advantage of bronze weaponry, and start to expand into places like Mesopotamia. Egypt is going to use chariots for the first time in warfare during this time frame, and they're also going to start to have the military invention of the composite bow, which allows for stronger bow and arrows. And you can start to see the impact there of the new empire here in the red as it starts to expand to places like Mesopotamia up here, all throughout the Middle East. And we have that. The New Kingdom is going to fall somewhere around 1150. It's first invaded by the sea. This could and there's really kind of a historical debate on where that happened. Are these people from what's going to become Greece? Are these people from the Phoenicians that were very talented sailors? Are they from wherever? So anyways, they're going to be invaded from the sea to begin with. It's going to weaken their power. Then bandits are going to come in from the west across the desert and raid Egypt, and then it's going to fall. Egypt's going to fall into a state of disrepair, in which the empire is going to be lost. Egypt is going to go on to be later ruled by places like Assyria, Persia, Greece, and Rome, to various degrees. Now, when you say they're ruled by, you're going to have various levels of control. In fact, like following Alexander the Great, you're going to have a dynasty that's going to rule Egypt for a long period of time. That will come to an end with Cleopatra around 50 BCE. And so, you could make an argument that the Egyptian culture, I suppose, lasts for somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,500 years. We already kind of established all these. There's a long tradition of inbreeding in Egypt, where the royal line is supposed to stay pure, and that's going to result in like brothers marrying sisters and all that. And so a lot of the time that when pharaohs are in charge, they're not mentally actually fit to run a kingdom, and so a lot of times they're kind of a figurehead of the figurehead of the government, where a lot of the day-to-day government activities are actually run by the bureaucracy. That's just the people that are working for the government. And one of the reasons that we know really anything, or the majority of what we do know about Egypt, is because of the writing that survives. Obviously, Egypt is in a very dry desert climate. A lot of the records were taken to the desert and buried, and then later discovered by archaeologists. And because of the dryness of the desert, these papers were preserved. And so a lot of what we know about Egypt is kind of boring. It's about taxes and prayers and those types of ideas. But these scribes that actually wrote everything out are really the kind of the heroes of this Egyptian culture, and the fact that we can kind of understand this connection that we have. All right. Again, we talked about this. Egypt was this redistributive economy in which the crops are going to be taxed by the government and then re-given to government workers or to the poor. The peasants in Egypt are going to be kind of like serfs. Like when we talk about medieval Europe, we'll start to discuss serfdom and whatnot, but they're not free. They're not able to go from place to place. They don't necessarily own their own land. They're not quote unquote slaves, but they're not free people, right? They can't leave, but they can't be necessarily poorly mistreated. One of the interesting things about Egypt was the gender roles of women. This is one of the few places in the ancient world where women and men are almost equals. Women could own property. They could inherit property from their family. They could exist as independent legal entities, so they could represent themselves in court. They could sign contracts and those types of things. They could sue somebody in court. They could sue for divorce if they were mistreated. And so that's kind of an interesting change that we won't see again really for quite some time in our discussions. So anyways, we'll stop there with Egypt. Hope you picked up something. If you have any questions with what we have, just reach out and let me know. And we'll come back and we'll start talking about Greece. Thanks.